You know that feeling when you're about to score 30% off, but they want your number? Ugh. Give them your Line 2 number instead. It's a second line on your phone, perfect for nabbing promo codes without inviting spam to your party. Sign up for every discount under the sun, then block the junk texts that follow. You get all the perks, but none of the spammy baggage. More codes, less chaos. Visit line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in the App Store and get your shopping sidekick today. Because the only thing blowing up your phone should be good deals.
Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today, I am here with author Sarah Hawley, best known for her Glimmer Falls series. She recently released A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. But today, we are here for her newest series, which starts off with Servant of Earth. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
I am so happy to have you on here. We've been talking for a little bit off and on here, and I'm glad we finally made it.
Yeah, no, me too. Thank you for being flexible with scheduling. It feels like the fall is always such a flurry of activity, and especially when you have a couple of releases coming out.
Yes, you've had 2 books out this year.
Yeah. So the first, I had one come out in August, which was The Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. And then, Servant of Earth is coming November 2nd. So having 2 releases just a couple months apart has been like it's amazing in a lot of ways, and it's also just so much. It's so much work.
I can only imagine. So let's go ahead and dive in and start off with Servant of Earth. Why don't you tell us about this one?
Yeah, so it is the first in a trilogy. It's sort of a dark fae fantasy or romantasy because there is a strong romantic subplot. It's about this sort of scrappy human woman who lives at the edge of this impassable bog, and on the other side are supposedly this wonderful fairy kingdom. And every 6 years, these girls are sent across the bog as sort of sacrifices to the fae. So when her best friend is chosen, Kenna, being a bit skeptical of the whole thing, decides to go with her. And, tragedy ensues. The fae are horrible. She ends up sort of forced into servitude to one of the fae houses, which is Earth House. And as a servant there, she has to help her new mistress undertake a series of trials called the Immortality Trials, where fairies have to earn their magic and their immortality. So she ends up in this sort of dangerous tournament, helping this fairy cheat to win, basically, all while trying to escape the awful fairy kingdom. And then she gets caught up with a very sexy prince, Prince of Fire, and he might be planning a secret rebellion against the king. So there's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of danger, and just adventure, and it's a really fun underground fantasy world, and I'm very excited for people to read it.
I am also very excited to read it. I have to say that one of my favorite aspects of a fae-based fantasy is when there is political intrigue. I just eat that up. It catches me every time. I cannot get enough.
Well, the Fae are such fun creatures to play with because you can do a lot with the lore. You can be very traditional in the lore. You can take it a lot of different ways. But I feel like one constant is that the Fae are tricky and they're always plotting. They've always got plots going on. So I feel like as a fantasy species, they lend themselves well to a lot of intrigue.
And as a fantasy author, it allows you so many opportunities for not just intrigue, but to be able to add in twists and turns and plots and the unexpected in any form.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think writing fantasy, I always want to write something with a speculative element because it allows you to just think so creatively. It allows you to make really intense stakes. It's just fun. It's fun to read and it's fun to write.
I absolutely agree. So you actually wrote Servant of Earth before your Glimmer Falls trilogy.
I did. This is an interesting origin story. It was the book I first queried with. I started querying in 2017, got an agent in 2018, and then the book did what they call dying on submission, where it was sent to publishers. Everyone went, maybe not. And I just figured the project was done and scrapped. And so I was writing new things. I wrote A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon during that time, and that ended up being my debut novel as a fantasy rom-com. And then somewhere along the line, my editor was like, wait, you have a fae fantasy. Can I see it? And I said, yes, of course you may see it. And they bought it, which was just amazing. It was this project back from the dead. You know, this is 6 years later or something. And it's interesting because, of course, now romantasy is so hot and there's so many fae fantasies on the market. And like, this is really the moment, I guess, the moment for it to come. But it's just been in the background for years now. And it's been this incredible experience to sort of, because I feel like in this career, you have to get used to rejection and you have to get used to projects dying at any stage in the process, querying on submission all over the place. Like, it's not my only dead project, I'll tell you that. And so you find out, you learn how to mourn these books and then move on and write new things. And this is my first time having gone through the mourning process of a story and a world, and all of a sudden it's back. And that's been really beautiful.
See, really, you were just ahead of the curve. You were hitting the trend
Yes.
before it was here.
I think
we weren't ready
at the time. Well,
we
I mean,
just
like,
weren't
I
ready.
was definitely not, I wasn't going to be like the first doing that, but I think I was in a lull because so much of it is like, what is the market doing at any given moment? And so this is sort of the post Court of Thorns and Roses lull where everyone's like, oh, I don't know. Kind of like where everyone's like, oh, no vampires for a while. It was like the vampires are dead right now. The fae are dead right now. Like traditional publishing has moved to different things. And then you get these spikes in interest. And it's funny for me as a reader because I want to read those things all the time. Like, I want to read vampires all the time. I want to read the fae all the time. But you do definitely get trends in the marketplace, and who knows why something hits at a given moment and why it doesn't. I do think the wait has been beneficial for this book, to be honest with you, because I got the chance to go back and do some pretty substantial revisions. Not really to the plot, but just on a craft level, on a sentence level, and that was good because I'm definitely a different writer now than I was 6 years ago.
I love that. And it really just goes to show that, even if you, as an aspiring writer, get the rejections and get told no and your novel dies somewhere, like, hope is still not all lost.
Yeah, I think, and that's really important also, I think, for authors to talk about. I think a lot of us, you see everyone's highlight reel basically on social media. You're seeing the wins. You're not seeing the years and years that went into writing. You're not seeing, like, some people have dozens of trunked manuscripts. I've got, I don't know, three or so dead projects. And, I queried too. I did the query trenches. I think my first book, I queried like 100 agents. And I ended up getting 3 offers, which was a lot. But I went through getting rejected or ghosted by a lot of other agents. It's just the way the business works. And I think what really matters almost more than any other skill set is resilience and the ability to say, okay, like, you're going to reject me, and also to know it's not personal. Like, I am not personally hurt by the agents who have rejected me or the editors who rejected the book the first time. Like, it's a business, and you just never know what's going to happen. So you have to sort of move forward, like, have hope and have grim determination, and just say, okay, like, this one's not working. I'll just keep going, and eventually something does happen.
Absolutely. And as you and I have talked outside of this podcast before, I am also a writer.
Yeah.
And when I received my first rejection, the very first thing I did, I immediately went and I posted it on Instagram. Not like the rejection itself, but like just letting everyone know, hey, I just got rejected. So that means I'm a real writer now, right? Like, that's what that means. You're not a real writer until someone tells you no.
I feel like I got the Band-Aid ripped off really quickly because when I sent my first batch of queries for Servant of Earth, and I got rejected by the first agent within 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
It was
Wow.
amazing. It was like, oh, all right, immediate shot to the heart. But in a way, it was good because I'm like, okay, it's begun. Like I've got the first one. We ripped that Band-Aid off. I didn't have to wait months for it to happen.
I wonder if that's some kind of record. 20 minutes.
I don't know. They were like, absolutely not for me.
I need some of our listeners who have done the rejection thing to let us know. Have you been rejected in under 20 minutes? Who has the fastest rejection?
Yeah.
But now look at you now. You are
I know.
a really popular and well-selling author. Like you have done great since that 20-minute rejection.
Well, thank you. No, it's amazing sort of being on this side after so long because I felt like it took a while. You know, if I started querying in 2017, and then I didn't get a book deal for like 4 years. And then it was another year and a half or so until the book came out. It felt like a very, very long time, even though I know it's not necessarily the longest timeline. It also was not the shortest timeline to getting published. But yeah, it's so much, isn't it? When you're that passionate about it and you're putting your creativity out there and your vulnerability out there and hoping for the best.
It is a very vulnerable position to put yourself in. I mean, we put a little bit of ourselves into our writing. These are our heart and soul put into the written word. So yes, putting it out there is extremely vulnerable and it absolutely can hurt, even if it's not personal, which of course we know it's not personal, but it does still hurt.
Yeah.
But I do think that this kind of transparency of the negative aspects of being a writer and getting the rejections and hearing those no's, I think that transparency is really important to other writers, to ourselves, and even to readers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So
and it really just goes to show, just because you hear no, even if you hear no for years, even if you hear no in 20 minutes, you can still be successful.
Yeah.
It still can come.
I always used to hate it because when I was in the trenches, people would say, in the query trenches, they'd be like, it just takes one yes. And I'd be like, okay, but where is the yes? Where is it? I'm aware it only takes one. However.
And even then, like, does it actually only take one yes? Like, you'll get one yes for your agent, but then you still have to get more yeses after you get an agent.
Yeah.
And as you know, dying on submission.
Going on submission. And I know some people, I don't think I got this far, but you can get 2 acquisitions where they actually take it to the meeting, and then some projects die at acquisitions. So it's like so every close. Step along the way, there's something.
Yeah, you really need like 6 yeses in a row from the right people.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the readers also have to say yes and buy the book.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only you only need one yes. I mean, if only it were that easy.
If only. If only.
So I would like to talk about what your writing process is like. You've gotten several novels in the books now, so to speak, actually literally, so to speak.
Yeah.
So how do you approach writing a novel?
How do I approach it? Oh goodness. I'm not the best outliner in the world. I wish I was. That's actually a skill I need to improve. Like I've read craft books and I feel like at some point just, music starts playing in my head and I'm just like, I'm not getting it. So a lot of what I do is discover the plot as I write. And it depends on the book because some of them had sometimes I'll write a synopsis where it's like a, 5 to 10 page story of the story and then use that as a guideline for generally what's going to happen. But I do go off script. So it's a mix of some preparing, some world building. I'm usually thinking a lot about the characters before I start writing because they're ultimately what's driving the plot. So I can know what's happening. But if the character wouldn't actually do that thing, if it's not consistent with their internal motivations, then the plot will go in a different direction. And so sometimes I'll have scenes and I'm just writing conversations as I feel like the characters would be speaking to each other. I don't have it planned out and it might turn out slightly differently They might be nicer to each other than I wanted them to be. It kind of really depends. But for me, I feel like it all springs from character and then world building, because I love imagining a world and I love thinking about what it looks like and smells like and the rules of it and what are the rules of magic and what's sort of the history of this world. I actually have to cut a lot of that in my drafts, because I'll have like a paragraph where I start talking about some historical occurrence in this town, or start talking about like a legend, or something, and it's like background information for the world, but ultimately the reader just needs the plot to happen. They don't necessarily need to know all of my lore. So that's I tend to have this is a very chaotic answer, but this is also like my writing is kind of chaotic. It's these bursts of inspiration and frantic typing mixed with loosey goosey outlines. But I always
outlines.
But I always do have a document open that I call my word graveyard, and that is where I copy paste things before I delete them, because I have a very hard time deleting words. You feel like, oh, they're gone now. And so it's like tricking myself, because I will never revisit those words. I will never add them back in again. Like, they're being cut for a reason. But if I copy paste them into a separate document, I can tell myself that I could still go back and recover them if I had to.
Yes,
so that's
absolutely.
Yeah. And that made it a lot easier to edit, because I have such a hard time letting go of things. And I am an overwriter. I always overwrite my goals by sometimes a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the opposite spectrum, where I am an underwriter, and I think it's because I started in fan fiction, if I'm being completely honest.
Uh-huh.
Following more of like an episodic style. So I'm like, I can knock out a really good novella if it's like, an episode length novella. But where I'm struggling is getting, oh no, we're talking film length compared to TV episode length. And because I started in fan fiction.
No, we have to talk about fan fiction, because
oh my goodness, we have to.
I got discovered by my editor through fan fiction.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. As a fan fiction writer, yes. Okay, I have to hear this story.
Okay, so I was already agented at this point. I was on my second book was dying on submission at the time. This is like 2019, maybe. And I was just so demoralized that I was losing the love of writing. And I don't even know why, but I read a Reylo fanfic one day, and I hadn't been a fanfiction reader at all. Someone had just recommended it on Facebook. And it ended up being a fic by Tia Guanzan, who now is the writer of the Hurricane Wars. But it was one of her early fics, and it was incredible. And I was obsessed. And so within a week, I was like, well, I could write a fan fiction. That would be fun. And then I realized that you post chapters and people read them and people like interact with them, which was the problem I was having with being on submission, is just the great silent wasteland, peppered with emails that said, no, this is not for me. And it was just such a hard time. And all of a sudden, fan fiction, it's like there's a thriving community, and you could talk to other people who are writing, and you can write without editing and just release chapters as they come to you. So I got really deep into it. Like, while my book was dying on submission, I started writing fanfic. And my first fic, I was supposed to be like 10 chapters. It ended up being 69 chapters. It ended up being like 170,000 words or something. And then I branched out into modern AUs, and I was just having so much fun. And one day, someone reached out to my fanfiction Twitter account, my anonymous fanfiction Twitter account, and said, hello, I'm an editor, and I would like to see your book. And that is how I got my book deal. And it's funny, because I was trying to get the book deal in the normal way.
Yeah.
And I was like constantly hitting walls. And then it was this random thing where someone had read my writing through Star Wars fan fiction, liked my writing, and then wanted to see my original stuff. And because I'd already been doing this for years now, I had original works for her. So it was just a really cool thing. And I'm a big fan of fan fiction. I think it's fun, it's creative, it's there's a very community-based aspect to it. So I'm a big, huge fan of it. I still read it. I do occasionally still write it. And we'll see. But what fandom were you in?
So my fandom, I mean, I've played with different fandoms, but my current novel, which I've talked about a few times, is a loose rewriting of a fan fiction I wrote when I was 15 years old,
Oh,
which was a number of years ago. And it is for the supernatural fandom.
yes. Okay. Okay.
That is probably the biggest fandom that I have written fan fiction in. I started when they were on season 2 of the show, and I had it planned literally episode by episode of the show, and then creating my own episodes in between those
Oh,
episodes. And I had it planned out all the way through season 5. And then my old computer at the time crashed and I lost everything and I gave up and I never touched it again.
no. Wait, you hadn't posted it?
Oh, it's posted. It's still posted. It is still
Okay.
available on fanfiction.net.
Yeah.
That one's really showing my age there. And, I've told people, if you can find it, I will tell you if it's mine, but I will not tell anyone where to find it outside of that. I will take it down if/when the novel ever materializes in the real world. But for now, it is still available if people can find it. But I have also done Harry Potter, Buffy, X-Men, and my friend and I, we had a Four Brothers fan fiction that we wrote together. And that's one a lot of people I don't think really are familiar with in the fan fiction sphere. I don't see a lot of Four Brothers fan fiction, but I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for it, for like a self-insert OC.
I do want to know. I want to know who your Buffy ship is.
Oh, so I mean a lot of my fan fiction I would do like OCs basically.
Okay.
And sometimes I had more than one, if I'm going to be honest. There was a few of them. And like sometimes it would be like my OC and Spike, like temporarily, but I don't want to mess with the relationships of the actual show. So it'd always be like they were together and then they broke up. Or they
like
were
one night
together
only.
and then she died. Like,
Oh my God.
yeah,
I feel like killing your self-insert character is a pathology of some kind. I don't know.
It might be. That might be too deep of a discussion.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to do just what's most dramatic.
Yeah, you do. And sometimes
Especially
it's a
in
sad
fan
ending.
fiction, it's got to be dramatic.
I've only written one that ended unhappily, but I warned everyone it was just a one shot, and I just wanted to write something really sad. And so I wrote something really sad, and I tagged it as really sad, and let everyone know it's going to be really sad. So and most people did not read that one, which is fair, but it was fun to write because I was like, ow, like this hurts, like it hurts to write, but also like.
I once wrote a one shot of the final episode of Angel through Ilaria's point of view of her dying.
Oh no.
Sometimes you're just in like a dramatic mood and you just got to do something like that. Let's see. Oh, and I had one more. I also wrote a lot of Alias fan fiction too.
I feel like I'm getting the vibe. You like the thrillers. You like
Yes.
Yeah, kind of dark.
Yes. Have some drama, have some sadness. If no one cries, is it even worth it? I mean, come on. There's got to be at some point, someone's got to die. Someone's got to cry. You got to be sad about something. I don't write the fluffy happy. I read the fluffy happy every now and then, but I definitely don't write it.
Yeah. I would say most of my fan fiction is in the fluffy, cracky sphere. A lot of it is comedy. A lot of it is the tone of A Witch's Guide. But I do have some more serious ones. And like I did a dark fic recently. It wasn't like that dark. Like I don't go like full dark fic in the way that a lot of people do. But it was very dark for me. So that was an interesting exercise.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
like
because Serpent of Earth is going to be a lot darker than the Glimmer Falls series. So I feel like readers going to be like, what is this? There's
Well,
no
I always like
jokes.
to see a tone change with an author. You know, it really shows your range. I love that.
Doing all of it. It's just two different parts of the brain. And all my early works, like obviously this one's from years ago. So it's like the first few books, they were all serious and kind of bloody and all of that. And then the rom-coms were the hard pivot to that was not what I normally write. But that's what people know me for now is the funny, whimsical stuff. So and which I'll keep writing. Like ideally, I would like to do all of it and just have a career across all kinds of different genres.
And that's the dream, really.
Yeah.
To be able to write a little bit of everything. And it's just a really great way to express those different sides of yourself. Oh, so you mentioned specifically Thea Guanzin
Yep.
and the Hurricane Wars. And I actually had her on this podcast earlier this year. She was one of my first episodes. And she is such a wonderful, bubbly person, and I adore her so much. She's great.
Yeah.
And
She's brilliant. She's a brilliant writer, and she's just
so brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the nicest person, very funny, very warm-hearted. So nothing but good things to say.
Absolutely. And, I wanted to use her as an example. We're talking about being a fan fiction writer and being a published author and how these two really can interconnect and commingle because so many current novels and some that are still, being announced and coming out within the next year or two come from fan fiction that I find it absolutely incredible, like how much fan fiction is being rewritten into legit published works.
Yeah. And it's not even it's a very visible trend right now, just because I think also because of the fandoms that are having a lot of it happen now are kind of lightning rods for controversy. So everyone loves to complain about the Reylos. So Reylos start getting publishing deals, and it's a new fun thing to complain about. But it's not new because Christina Lauren did what was their fan fiction? It was Beautiful Bastard was a reworked fanfic, and it was either Twilight or 50 Shades because I know one of those was fanfic of the other one.
Yeah, 50 Shades was a fan fiction of Twilight, though they kind of try to deny it now. We were there when it was written. We know. Yeah. We saw this happen in real life.
Yeah.
The Cassandra Clare books, those were
Cassandra Clare
fan fiction.
Yeah, one of my favorite authors is Mel Jean Brooke, and she was discovered by my editor. Actually, found her through fan fiction as well. And this was like, I think it was like Batman, Wonder Woman, maybe.
That's amazing.
But I think her first book is heavily reworked, and it's completely unrecognizable. Like that's the thing about a lot of this. It's not just pulling it off of Archive of Our Own and then just slapping a cover on it and putting it up. Like the authors are putting a tremendous amount of work in to make it original. And then modern AUs are already different enough that it's not just like, like Kylo Ren is probably not actually like the grumpy barista. Like he's it's a very watered down version of what canon characters will do. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of all the fan fiction authors getting deals now.
I love it. And some of them are like really intense ones too, like Manacled.
Manacled. Oh my God. That's gonna be controversial when it comes out, I'm sure.
It's gonna be I mean, it was already controversial as a fan fiction, and now being out there for the general public.
Yeah. But I mean we're having such a dark romance boom at the moment. It's funny, it feels like there's these different paths of what's very popular. So you've got a lot of very cozy, cute little like witchy rom-com sort of things. And then you have like a lot of very dark serial killer, mafia, romance, things like that. But no, Manacled getting a deal. But then also the author of Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, I think is the name.
Yeah,
that was amazing. I loved it so much.
But she's got stumbled over that title, but I'm excited to see her getting a deal out of that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's an original book. Like it's not the reworked fanfic.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's funny because I was reading that one at the same time as I was reading Manacled. I had like two different browser tabs open, and it was very tonally whiplash, jumping back and forth. I was like, oh my God.
Really soothing those two sides.
Yes. Yeah. The two sides of my brain.
And just creating utter chaos.
Yeah. And then Julie Soto was a fanfic author. Obviously,
Yep.
Allie Hazelwood was a fanfic author.
Oh yeah, Allie Hazelwood, Ashley Poston.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to find Ashley Poston's fic. I feel like
I know that there is
identity.
one. There's got to be. It's
There's
probably
gotta
under
be.
a fake name. But I mean, she has too many books that are published that are too much like
Mhm.
fan fiction for her to have been a fan fiction writer. Like I
Yeah.
know she's got one.
I know she's got one. No, I was reading, which I love her books so much, but I was reading The Dead Romantics, and it was like page 4 or something. The hero is
Oh
named
my
Benji
goodness.
Andor, and I was like,
Benji
hang
Andor,
on.
like Ben Andor.
hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Drop the AO3 username, babe, please.
Yeah,
Please.
like that is the most AO3 name I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
I loved it. I love that. That book is so good.
Yeah, just too funny. You have to send me yours. I'll send you mine and you can send
Okay.
me yours.
Yeah, well, the secret fic identity exchange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the only reason that mine is hard to find is because it's so old and I haven't like that one I stopped publishing over a decade ago, but it is still on there and I do occasionally even still get hits on it.
Okay.
Not often. It is rare, but I do occasionally still get a hit, which is just blows my mind.
Yeah.
But then I switched to the X-Men fic with my best friend for a while, and we would take turns. You know, back in the day, high school, we would write in notebooks and we'd pass the notebook in
Yes.
between class. Not, passing notes about boys and stuff. No, we passed fan fiction back and forth.
Yes.
But then as we grew older, we switched to email and we started doing this X-Men fanfic. And that was the one more recent that I've posted, but that even was probably 8 years ago since we updated that one. So I don't think I've posted any actual fan fiction in years. So there's everyone's challenge.
Just to find it.
Yes, there's the challenge.
If you can hunt it down on if there's enough context clues.
Now, are your fanfic writing, is it just Star Wars or do you have other fandoms that you would jump into?
I had a few, like I've done little one-offs in other fandoms. Not a lot though. A vast majority is Star Wars.
Specifically Reylo or other eras?
Yes, specifically.
Yeah, we know.
I mean, like I have, like I also have some background ships, but yeah, it's majority Reylo.
Yeah,
I
had
enemies
done
to lovers.
a little Star Wars, but I never posted it anywhere. It was really just for me, and it was all Clone Wars era.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do an Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme fic.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
was
feel
that was my era.
there's a lot to explore in that little throuple. So maybe someday I'll do that one.
Maybe someday.
I remember when I was like watching it and rewatching it, I'm always like, why did she pick Anakin when Obi-Wan is right there? Oh, and
Literally
normally
right there.
I'm like, normally I like the bad guy, but I was like, look at the like pent up bearded, like snarky Jedi master. Like, what are you doing? Like, pick him. So now I'm like, well, maybe she doesn't have to pick. Maybe why choose? Why choose?
Exactly. That's what we need.
That's what we
That's
need.
what we need. A
It
why
might still
choose
happen. Yeah.
Anakin and Obi-Wan. I can absolutely get down with that.
Yeah. Good.
So I'm here. I'm ready as soon as you write it.
It's like all of a sudden, like 10,000 words of the nastiest smut you've ever read are going to drop, and it's going to be my fault.
You know what? That would honestly like make my day. Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that we came on here to talk about Servant of Earth, and here
I know,
we
I was
are.
like, not.
Obi-Wan smut.
Yes.
There you
yes.
go. That's it. That's the podcast.
That's it. Which is the Obi-Wan smut episode.
What more could you want? I mean, what else is
What
there?
more?
Come on.
What more?
Yeah, I feel like there's so much Reylo that people are just sleeping on Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Yeah. But I feel like I would want to do canon verse for that. And I would have to do some research just because I was less invested in those movies, I would say. Yeah.
Well, that is what Wikipedia is for.
That is true. That is true.
I love Wikipedia. Shout out to whoever idea that was, because that was genius.
Great idea. Yeah.
It is such a massive resource that can answer like any freaking Star Wars question you have. And also, I'm always down for a good pun.
Yeah.
Give me some wordplay. I love it.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a tiny bit with the love of Fae, but let's talk a little bit about your inspirations for Servant of Earth.
Yeah. I guess I mean, like, I wanted to write Fae. That was the origination of the thought. I was like, I want to write this, and I wanted to write dark Fae. Like, these are not nice. They're hot, but they're not nice. And I just started thinking about that. I was like, okay, well, if it's Fae, like, I always like writing a world where there's an outsider in it. Is the best way to explore a world in general, I think, when you're starting a new fantasy series. So it's got to be a human woman. And she's got to like go to the land of the Fae. And I'm like, well, how is she going to go to the land of the Fae? And why is she there? And what is she doing? And it's funny because book ideas come from all kinds of places with me. Sometimes I'll dream them up, but sometimes I just get a word stuck in my head and I don't know why. There's just a word or there's a phrase and I'll just be stuck thinking about those words being like, who is this or what is this? So for one of the books that never quite went somewhere was a YA fantasy. And it was I just woke up one morning going brick and tiny. And I was like, what is brick and what is tiny? But it was brick and tiny. I was like, and I don't know what this is. And eventually I realized that they were characters and they were magic users. And I started figuring out who they were. And then the world kind of grew from them. Another time it was just like this nonsensical word that then became the title of the book. And then this time, all I knew is that I wanted Fae and I wanted a human woman going to the Fae. And I just got this title in my head that just said The Queen of the Nasties. And I was like, well, what is that? Who is that? Like, I don't know where this came from. It just popped into my brain as I was thinking about this book. It just went, the Queen of the Nasties. And I was like, well, who's the Queen of the Nasties? And so that started with what are the Nasties? And in this book, there's sort of the equivalent of dark Fae. I mean, all the Fae are dark. They're all horrible. But you find a lot of fairy lore, you end up with these groups, these groupings and these tiers. So you might get the Seelie and the Unseelie, or like the light court and the dark court, or trooping fairies versus solitary fairies. There's a lot of sort of categories and delineations in the lore itself, which lends itself really well to world building and doing fun things. So I was like, well, the Nasties are clearly a type of fairy. And then I ended up coming up with the structures of the fairies from that. I was like, well, there's going to be 3. So there's going to be the noble fae, who are like the traditional, beautiful, everyone loves them, glamour creatures. Of course, they're awful. And then there's going to be the underfae, which is going to be like a middle tier of the servants and the slightly more monstrous looking ones. And then there's going to be the nasties, which are like the blood-sucking fiends of the world. And then within that, I was like, okay, well, if we're splitting things into groups, how are the noble fae organized? And I came up with these 6 houses based on magical powers. And they're fire, earth, light, void, illusion, and blood. And so then I was like, okay, well, I have all of these. And what are each of these houses? And I started thinking about the powers and what you can't overpower one of them. Like, they need to have drawbacks and they need to have benefits, and there have to be sort of guidelines and rules and things. So I started thinking about what their magic would be. And then it was sort of like the plot came from the world in a way. And then once I had this sort of structure of how this world works, that's actually the only book I've ever outlined in detail. It was like a week where I outlined, it was like a 30-page outline.
Wow.
It's never happened since. It's never happened. But like I did go off outline a bit, but it was like scene by scene in that one. And it's like, how do I channel that? How do I make my brain do that again? Because that was also the one of the easiest times I've had drafting. It took me a month and a half to finish the first draft, and that was like, 140,000 words probably.
Wow.
And then it took another month and a half to edit it down to like 115,000 words. And then so it was like 3 months from coming up with the idea to start querying. And it was so great. And then I had the exact opposite experience with a recent book where I was like, I just didn't have a structure in my mind, and I just kind of rambled my way through a very long first draft. And it was a much rougher process. So I'm like, I want to get back to whatever my brain was doing when I was thinking about Servant of Earth, because that was just a really interesting process. It felt like it all kind of poured out, and there was such a framework to it that I have not been able to replicate since.
Well, because you put all of it in the first one, your brain's like, nope, we are never doing that again.
Never again. Never again.
Never again. Not going to happen. Yeah. You outlined too well.
Yeah. It's like, I think I need to find some, like I've read Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and I've read some other ones, and a lot of my structuring of story is just intuitive. Like I do a loose 3-act structure where I'm like, okay, like generally like the shape of the peaks and the valleys and what's going to happen, and something awful is going to happen at the end of the second act and all of that. But a lot of it is just sort of intuitively thinking about the energy of the story and how it feels, versus I have a hard time when it's like, here are the breakdown of you have to have exactly these scenes. And my least favorite thing, there's this beat in Save the Cat called Fun and Games, and it's the middle where stuff happens, and the middle where stuff happens is my least favorite part of writing any book, and I just despise it, and I despise the fact it's called Fun and Games because it's not fun at all.
For me, the part I hate the most is the beginning.
Yeah? Why?
Yeah. I just want to like be in it, I don't want to like take my time and introduce everyone because, in my head, I already know everyone.
Yeah.
So, having the actual act of putting that into words feels like homework.
Yeah.
And feels like work, where I just want to like dive right into the drama and dive right into the action, or the spookiness when it's a horror, or the romance when it's a romance. Like, I just want to dive right into that action and like have someone else introduce it for me.
Yeah, I do actually find that that's a sort of challenging, especially now that I'm writing series, is when you're on the second book. And like Glimmer Falls, I had to make it so they can be read as standalones, but I mean, reading them in order is fun too, but that means you have to give just enough context without boring everyone, so that if someone picks it up on the third book, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I get who these miscellaneous characters are. Because romance readers also love when their favorites come back and are just in the periphery. So
Yep.
You can't just be like, and here's a random person, and we're not going to tell you who they are whatsoever. They're just here.
They're just
so
here.
Yeah, so you have to kind of work in enough of that. And that was interesting in drafting book 2, the sequel to Servant of Earth as well. Because just trying to come up with like how much is enough world building without, or not real world building, but like references to the first book. How much is enough without being too much that people are like, okay, we get it. You don't need to beat us over the head. But also, if someone's picking this up and they haven't read the first book in 6 months or a year, they have to be able to be like, oh yeah, I remember something like that happening.
Now,
So,
will book 2 be an interconnected standalone, or is it a continuation?
No. This is a continuation. So this one's going to be like a proper trilogy where it's the same characters the whole time. It's not standalone stories.
I am a sucker for trilogies.
Yeah.
That is my favorite storytelling style over anything else.
Yeah.
I'm always a sucker for a good trilogy. And, I think it's honestly because of growing up with Star Wars.
Yeah, that could be it. Oh, I feel like a lot of books I read were series back then. And yeah, just growing up, you read a lot. Although I was reading a lot of quartets as well, which would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think next I would want to do a standalone, just because this was doing a second book, a sequel, like a proper sequel, was actually very difficult. And so I'm like, well, maybe when this trilogy is done, maybe my next project will just be a standalone. And we'll just see what that feels like instead of having to sort of maintain threads across many years.
One thing I have noticed with having this podcast and, just talking with such a variety of authors is so many authors have completely different experiences and processes with different series. And I think that kind of ties back into how on Servant of Earth you were able to do such a detailed outline that you've never been able to recreate again. And it's because every series or project has a completely energy, so your process to writing it has been completely different.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's very energy based, and it might be what's going on in your life at the time, how much time you have to dedicate to things, where it's coming from. I know Witch's Guide took me a long time to write, probably longer than it's ever taken me to write a book. I think it took a year off and on, but that's because I was drafting it during COVID, and I was having a very hard time with that. I was writing Demon's Guide when abortion rights were, being rolled back, and that was really hard. Especially, you're trying to write romance and think about love and think about consent and bodily autonomy and things like that. And so all sorts of things can shape how easily a book comes out. And some are harder than others.
Yeah, I can definitely see how writing romance is more challenging during great times of turmoil. And like, I'm writing a happy love story, but everything in the world sucks right now.
Yeah. You're like, I cannot in good conscience have you fall in love in this hellscape we live in. Like,
exactly. How am I supposed to live, laugh, love in these conditions?
I know. I think I would have a much harder time if I was writing pure contemporary, or even our world. So I did have we'll see if it ever comes back, but I've got like a paranormal investigator rom-com that was in the works, but it was set in like our actual world, whereas Glimmer Falls series is set in a magical version of the world. And there's so much, I was writing Glimmer Falls and being like, is it realistic for these millennials to own houses? Like, no, absolutely not. But
it's not at all.
Yeah, so it's like, but there was this utopian element where I could say, well, it's possible in this version of the world because there's also dragons, like, of course they can afford houses. And then trying to write something set in our actual world, even that speculative element, I was like, whoa, like, this poor heroine is like going through it. Like,
and what's really sad is a millennial owning a nice home is as realistic as dragons.
I know. Like, honestly, that was a part where I was like, this feels really unbelievable. And like in the meantime, like there's like centaurs like running through the library, and I'm like, no, but the housing prices, that's the part. That's actually
the fantasy.
Disbelief, exactly. Yeah. But I would have a hard time, I think, writing actual even like magicless contemporary romance. Like I've had ideas for that, but I think that would be especially difficult for all kinds of reasons, and that's one of them.
Yeah, we're just too realistic that I'm the exact same way. I sometimes even struggle with reading things that are very clearly based in our current universe.
Yeah.
Because one, I'm going to be overly critical of it. Like, okay, you're in our actual universe and you have a 5-bedroom house. Sure you do. Okay, you didn't inherit it. Like, who died to give you this house? Because you didn't buy it.
Yeah. I also struggle with stakes in pure contemporary because fantasy, like the stakes are really high.
They're much higher, yes.
Fun. Yeah, and especially because I love enemies to lovers, but if you do enemies to lovers in a contemporary context where there's no reason for them to be mean to each other, like they're
just mean people.
They're just mean, and you're like, why are you being so mean? Whereas if someone's like they're on opposite sides of a war and like he rides his griffin in and like tries to stab her, but like she stabs him first, I'm like, that sounds like a healthy basis for a relationship.
Exactly.
That's fine. But like this man was really rude to this lady in the elevator.
And there's just no reason for that.
There's no reason.
I've always said that, like, when it comes to real life, like, enemies to lovers is maybe the worst trope in real life, and the only healthy relationship has to be like a friends to lovers kind of thing, because anything else that you read, if you applied it to a real relationship, it's just covered in red flags.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like there's some cinnamon roll heroes and things who are actually like quite healthy,
Yeah.
non-red flags. It was interesting though, writing A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire, because that's my like pure cinnamon roll hero, and he's just a nice man. And he's like got anxiety, and he's like very consent focused, and he's like a family guy, and he like cooks things, and he's just like nice. And he was really hard to write. So I was like, how do I make him sexy in a way that you need to make him sexy for a book? Because like if I was going to marry one of my characters, like that was an option, like that would obviously be the marriage material one. But the previous book, they're getting in like fights, they're getting in bar brawls, like there are these immortal demons doing who knows what, like and there's snark, and it's like a lot. There's that edge to them that makes them really fun to write, and a little easier to make sexy because it's like the bad boy element. And I just had this like very good boy wearing a sweater vest, which I love sweater vests, by the way.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I genuinely find them very attractive. And so it felt like a challenge to write him because he was missing, like he's not going to pick up sword. He's not going to menace anyone. And that was actually fun because his love interest, like she is the sword wielder. She's the knife thrower. She's the one with the fangs and the edge and the anger issues. And then he's just going to be like, okay, like I'll set up a training dummy for you in the yard for you to throw knives at. And then I'll like make you a sandwich when you're done threatening people. And like, this will be fun. But yeah, but I think really nice people are what we should all be striving for in real life. And they're also sometimes difficult in fiction.
They are. Like, they're exactly what we need in real life. But when it comes to fiction, they're like kind of boring.
Yeah.
So if you look at a potential person to date or something, and you think if this person was in a book, they'd be boring, go for it.
Go for it. Do it.
That's your sign. Go for it. If you would not want to read them in the book because they are not interesting enough, that's the one. That's the one right there.
Yeah. And if you're ever like, wow, this guy is reminding me of some of the red flag heroes, like run. Some things are better kept in the realm of fantasy.
Exactly. Alrighty. Well, we are coming to a close here.
Okay.
It is time for us to wrap up this wonderful, lovely chat.
I know we've covered so much ground.
We've covered so much ground and so many topics. This has been so great. And I just want to thank you again, Sarah, for coming on and chatting with me today and diving into our fan fiction past. And
yes.
This has been so great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Do you have any final messages or parting words you would like to share?
Oh, yeah. So I guess I would ask people to sign up for my newsletter if they want news on my books. My website is sarahhawleyauthor.com, and that also has information about my books and events. And then if you want to follow me, I'm Ms. Sarah Hawley. I'm mostly on Instagram. But yeah, and then if you want to buy Servant of Earth, I would love that. It's out November 12th, and you should be able to pick it up, but kind of anywhere.
All right. Well, thank you everyone again so much for listening. This has been Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @MustLoveBooksPodcast. Thank you and happy reading.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With the Capital One Venture X card, you earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy. Plus, you get premium benefits at a collection of luxury hotels when you book on Capital One Travel. And with Venture X, you get access to over 1,000 airport lounges worldwide. Open up a world of travel possibilities with the Capital One Venture X card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
You know that feeling when you're about to score 30% off, but they want your number? Ugh. Give them your Line 2 number instead. It's a second line on your phone, perfect for nabbing promo codes without inviting spam to your party. Sign up for every discount under the sun, then block the junk texts that follow. You get all the perks, but none of the spammy baggage. More codes, less chaos. Visit line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in the App Store and get your shopping sidekick today. Because the only thing blowing up your phone should be good deals.